My family excluded me from 4 weddings because I was too young. Now I got married, but didn't invite any of them, and blocked everyone when they came begging. I'm 28 years old, I work as a freelance graphic designer, and basically my entire family hates me right now because I didn't invite them to my wedding. And I know how that sounds. Like, it sounds super bad when you say it like that without context. But let me explain the whole story, because I think when you finish reading, you're going to understand why I did it. Or at least I hope so, because honestly, I need someone to tell me I'm not completely crazy. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, and when I say the youngest, it's not like they're only 2 or 3 years older than me. No, there are huge age gaps between all of us. Samuel, the oldest, is 18 years older than me. Nicholas is 16 years older, Danielle, 13, and Vincent, 10. So basically, I grew up like an only child because by the time I was born, they were all already in high school or college, living their adult lives while I was barely learning to walk. I think I was an accident. They never told me directly, but you don't need to be a genius to figure it out. My parents already had 4 kids, and suddenly I show up a decade after the last one. Growing up like that was weird. Honestly, my siblings came and went. They'd visit during vacations or for holidays, and I always felt like this little thing that everyone looked at with affection but from a distance. You know what I mean? Like when you see a cute puppy, but it's not yours, so you just look at it and say, "Aw, how cute," and that's it. I never had that close relationship that siblings who grow up together have. We never played together or shared a room or anything like that. To them, I was basically my parents' young daughter more than their sister. At least that's how they always made me feel. It all started when I was 10 years old. Samuel, my oldest brother, was getting married to a girl he had met in college. I think her name was Jessica or Jennifer. I honestly don't remember well because I only saw her like twice in my life. I was super excited because I mean, it was the first family wedding since I could remember, and I thought it was going to be like the princesses and all that stuff 10-year-old girls think. My mom took me to buy a new dress, a pink one with embroidered flowers that I loved, and I was telling all my friends at school that I was going to go to a real wedding. And then like 2 weeks before the wedding, my parents sat me down in the living room, and my mom had that face that adults make when they're going to tell you something they know you won't like, but they're going to try to make it sound reasonable. They told me that Samuel's wedding was going to be adults only, that he and his fiancée had decided they didn't want kids there because they wanted it to be an elegant and quiet celebration. I remember my dad said something like kids get bored at weddings anyway and that I'd be better off staying with Aunt Carol, and I just sat there trying to process what they were telling me. I didn't understand anything. Like, what? Do you mean I can't go? He's my brother. It's his wedding. Why is everyone going to be there except me? And the worst part is, I tried to be mature about it. I didn't throw a tantrum or anything in that moment. I just asked if they were sure, and when they said yes, I went to my room. But I cried for hours that night, literally for hours, and I could hear my parents downstairs watching TV like nothing was wrong while I was heartbroken. On the day of the wedding, I stayed with my Aunt Carol, who spent the whole day telling me not to be sad, that there would be more weddings, that this wasn't a big deal. But to me, it was because it was the first time I felt so clearly that I didn't belong in my own family. I thought maybe it had just been Samuel's thing, that he and his wife were just that strict or something. But 2 years later, Nicholas announced his engagement, and guess what? Another child-free wedding. By then, I was 12 years old. I wasn't a little kid who was going to run around everywhere or throw tantrums. I was a preteen who could behave perfectly well, but it didn't matter. My parents didn't even bother sitting me down this time. They just assumed I already knew how it was going to be, and I stayed home again, this time with a babysitter because Aunt Carol wasn't available. What hurt about that one is that Nicholas had always been the quiet brother, the serious one, the one I thought might realize this was affecting me. But no, he also chose to have his perfect day without his little sister there. And I started to realize that this wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. And that pattern basically said, I didn't matter enough to make an exception. When I was 15 is when everything really exploded. Danielle announced her engagement, and I, being the naive person I was, thought that maybe with her it would be different because, well, she's a woman. Maybe she'd understand better how I felt, right? Plus, by then I was already in high school. I wasn't a child at all anymore. Turns out Danielle decided her rule was going to be that only people 16 and older could go, and I was 15. I was going to turn 16 like 2 months after the wedding. I begged her. I literally begged her to make an exception. I told her I would behave super well, that I wouldn't cause problems, that I just wanted to be there to see her get married, that it was important to me. And she told me she was sorry but rules were rules and that she couldn't make exceptions because then other relatives would want to bring their kids too. I told her I wasn't just another relative. I was her sister. And she just shrugged and said there would be other occasions for us to spend time together. I got so angry that I started protesting loudly at home, telling my parents this was unfair, that I was part of the family too, that why didn't anyone ever consider me? And you know what they did? They punished me. They took away my phone for 6 months for being, and I quote, a dramatic brat who was making everything about herself when she should be happy for her sister. 6 months for expressing that I felt excluded from my own family. By the time Vincent announced his engagement 2 years later, I was already 17, almost 18, and honestly, I wasn't even surprised anymore when they said it was going to be an 18 and over wedding. What did surprise me and hurt me like never before was finding out that my cousin Amanda, who had just turned 18, was invited. She could go, but I couldn't, and the difference was literally a few months of age. I asked Vincent if he couldn't make an exception since it was so close to me turning 18, and he told me, and I swear I'll never forget this, and he told me he understood I was upset, but that he and his fiancée wanted to be able to relax and enjoy, without worrying about minors. Like I was a problem. Like my mere presence was something to worry about. I was 17 years old. I was going to start college in a few months. But to my brother, I was still this inconvenient thing that was better kept away from important events. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, I think. Something broke in me that day, and I stopped trying to have a close relationship with my siblings. What for? They had never seen me as an equal. I had always been the annoying little sister who didn't fit into their perfect adult lives. I went to college. I distanced myself from my family. I'd respond to Christmas messages and birthday calls, but nothing more. My parents always told me I was being immature, that I needed to get over the wedding thing, that my siblings loved me, but I was choosing to distance myself. I met Owen when I was 24, at a coffee shop near my work, where we both went every morning to buy coffee. We started talking, we became friends, and eventually we started dating. One of the first deep conversations we had was about family, and when I told him this whole story, he looked at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing, he told me, and no one had ever told me this before. He told me that what had happened to me was super messed up, that my siblings had been cruel, that my parents should have defended my feelings instead of invalidating them all the time. It was the first time someone validated how I felt, the first time someone didn't tell me I was exaggerating or being dramatic. Owen told me that my family had made me feel invisible my whole life, and that I didn't owe them anything. And hearing that from someone else was like taking a huge weight off my shoulders because it meant I wasn't crazy, that my feelings were valid, that I had the right to be hurt by everything that had happened. We got engaged like a year ago. It was super nice and romantic and all that, and obviously we started planning the wedding. At first, I didn't even think much about who I was going to invite. I was focused on finding the perfect venue and the dress and all those things. But eventually the time came to make the guest list, and that's when Owen asked me if I was going to invite my siblings. I was quiet for a while, thinking about that. Imagining Samuel, Nicholas, Danielle, and Vincent sitting there at my wedding, smiling and acting like they were this perfect united family, like they hadn't systematically excluded me from all their special days throughout my entire childhood. And I realized that no, I didn't want them there. I didn't want their fake presence. I didn't want to have to smile and act like everything was okay when it wasn't. I didn't want my perfect day to include the people who had made me feel like I didn't deserve to be at theirs. I told Owen I wasn't going to invite them, and he asked me if I was sure. Not in a critical way, but just to confirm this was what I really wanted. And I told him yes, that I was completely sure. He told me he supported me in whatever I decided, that it was my wedding, and I should only be surrounded by people who truly loved and valued me. We made our guest list, like 50 people, all close friends, and some cousins I did have a good relationship with. My parents were on the list initially because, I don't know, I guess a part of me still had hope that maybe this time they'd choose me over my siblings, but that was naive of me, obviously. My mom found out my siblings weren't on the list like 2 months before the wedding. I had been super careful not to mention it, but she somehow managed to see part of the list when she came to visit me unannounced, like she always does, and saw that their names weren't there. She became hysterical, literally hysterical, started yelling at me about, how could I be so cruel, so spiteful, so selfish? How could I exclude my own family from my wedding? And I just stood there thinking, really? Really? You're telling me this? I said, Mom, they excluded me from all their weddings, every single one of them, throughout my entire childhood, and now you want me to invite them like nothing quite happened. She said that had been different, that they had their reasons, that I was a child then, but now I was an adult and should be the mature one. I asked her why I had to be the mature one, why I had to forgive and forget when they had never apologized, never acknowledged that they had hurt me. She said family was family and you couldn't stay angry forever, that this was going to cause huge drama, that everyone was going to think I was the bad guy. I told her I didn't care what they thought, that this was my wedding and I was going to invite whoever I wanted. And she told me that if I didn't invite my siblings, then she and my dad weren't going to come either. She thought that would make me change my mind, but I just said, okay, don't come. And she left my apartment furious. The next thing that happened was that the family group chat, which honestly I didn't even remember I was part of because I'd had it muted for years, exploded with messages. Danielle wrote a super long, passive-aggressive message about how it was sad that some people couldn't let go of the past and how she had always wanted to have a close relationship with me, but I had decided to distance myself. Vincent wrote something about how he understood. I was upset, but this was taking things too far. Samuel didn't even bother writing much, just put a short message saying this was childish of me. Nicholas didn't write anything, which was typical of him. I read all the messages, every single one of them, and then I left the group without responding. I didn't owe them an explanation, not after everything. Owen hugged me while I cried that night, not because I was doubting my decision, but because it hurt. It hurt so much to realize that my family was never going to understand why this mattered so much to me. They were never going to validate my feelings or admit they had hurt me. The next few days were a nightmare. My parents showed up at my apartment unannounced, knocking on the door insistently until I opened it. My dad told me I was being ridiculous, that I was ruining the family over something that happened years ago, that I needed to grow up. My mom was crying, saying she couldn't believe her daughter was so cold, so calculating, so capable of hurting her siblings this way. I told them to leave, that I wasn't going to change my mind, and my dad said this was going to be my decision to live with, that I was going to lose my whole family because of my pride. I told them that if my family only wanted me when it was convenient for them, then it wasn't a great loss, and my mom looked at me like I had slapped her before leaving with my dad. Aunts and uncles and cousins started calling me, people I barely knew, all telling me I was making a mistake. That family was the most important thing, that I was going to regret this. I blocked like 15 numbers in 1 week. Honestly, I lost count. Leah, my best friend and maid of honor, told me she was proud of me for standing firm, that she knew this wasn't easy, but I was doing the right thing for myself. My wedding day came, and it was perfect. Literally perfect. We got married in a small garden with only the people who really mattered to us there, people who truly knew us and wanted to be there for the right reasons. Owen looked at me like I was the most important thing in the world. Leah gave a beautiful speech that made me cry, and there wasn't a single awkward or tense or fake moment. We danced and laughed and ate cake, and it was exactly what I had dreamed of, surrounded by real love, not family obligation. I didn't think about my siblings all day. Honestly, I didn't have time to because I was too busy being happy. But later, like a week after the wedding, I found out from a cousin that my mom and Danielle had organized a family dinner on the night of my wedding, like some kind of alternative event so everyone could get together and act like my wedding wasn't happening. I don't know whether to laugh or cry when I found out about that. It was so pathetic and yet so perfectly in character for them. The weeks after the wedding were more of the same. More attempts to make me feel guilty. More messages from relatives saying I should apologize, that I should fix things. Danielle even had the audacity to criticize my wedding photos that I had posted, saying they looked very casual and unprofessional, as if her opinion mattered at all. My mom showed up at my apartment again like 2 weeks ago, and this time Owen was there. He told her very calmly but very firmly that she needed to leave, that she was harassing his wife, that she wasn't welcome unless she could respect our decisions. My mom tried to ignore him and talk directly to me, but I just stood there behind Owen, letting him handle the situation, and eventually she left. I blocked everyone. Every single one of them. My parents, my four siblings, all the aunts and uncles and cousins who couldn't stay quiet and mind their own business. And you know what? I feel light. I feel free. I feel like I can finally breathe without feeling this constant weight of never being enough for my family. People ask me if I don't feel bad, if I don't miss my family, if I don't regret it. And the truth is, yes. There are moments where it hurts. There are moments where I think about what could have been if things were different, if my siblings had seen me as their equal, instead of as an inconvenience. But I don't regret my decision. Not one bit. They had 4 opportunities, 4 whole weddings, to show me that I mattered, that I was part of the family, that my presence was something they wanted and not something they tolerated. And in all 4 opportunities, they chose not to have me there. I had one wedding, one opportunity to decide who deserved to be at one of the most important days of my life, and I chose not to include the people who had spent years making me feel like I didn't deserve to be at theirs. I'm not the bad guy in this story for not inviting them. They're the bad guys for making me feel invisible throughout my entire childhood and then expecting me to forgive them and include them like nothing had happened. And my parents are just as guilty for never defending me, for never telling my siblings what they were doing was wrong, for always choosing them over me. Owen tells me I'm the strongest person he knows, that making this decision required more courage than most people have, and I think he's right. It's hard to cut ties with your family. It's one of the hardest things I've done in my life, but sometimes it's necessary for your own peace of mind and your own happiness. Yesterday, Owen and I were looking at our wedding photos again. You know, those moments where you feel nostalgic and want to relive the day. And I realized that in every photo I'm truly happy, genuinely happy, not faking it, not forcing smiles. And that's something I never would have had if I had invited my family. Because I would have spent a whole day worrying about keeping the peace, about not causing drama, about pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. My marriage to Owen is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I'm building my own family now, one based on mutual respect and real love, not on blood obligations that only go one way. And if that makes me the bad guy, if that makes people think I'm spiteful or cruel or whatever, that's okay. I'd rather be that than continue being the little girl who begged for a seat at the table and was always told there was no room for her. Owen asked me yesterday if I thought my siblings would ever understand why I did this, and honestly, I don't know. Maybe yes. Maybe someday they'll have their own kids and understand what it feels like to be constantly excluded and left aside. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll never see beyond their own perspective, and they'll always think I'm the one who overreacted and caused unnecessary drama. And you know what? That's okay too. Because it's not my problem anymore. It's not my responsibility to make them understand something that should have been obvious from the beginning. I'm at peace with my decision. I'm happy with my life, and for the first time in a long time, I feel seen. I feel valued. I feel like I belong somewhere. And that somewhere doesn't include the people who spent years making me feel the opposite.